Yep. Okay, thank you.
Are we back again?
We're back again. Hi, I'm Kelly Orchard.
I'm Ken Orchard.
And he's my dad. And between the two of us, we have about,
This is my daughter.
Yeah, we have about 70 or... Actually, it's more than 70, I'm afraid. Because you started in 1959.
Right.
And so that's now like 60 some years.
Yes.
And I've been in radio for 37. So that's really, it's almost 100 years between the two of us. We lied on the last one. I said it was like 70. But it's like almost 100 years of radio. We're two generations of radio broadcasters. And this is another story that I'm thrilled to share with Dad. These are stories that my siblings and I have heard our entire life. And really, we wanted to just kind of preserve Dad's history and make some videos of him talking about his stories. But now we're just posting them up on YouTube for anyone who would enjoy the history of radio, especially Los Angeles radio, to just enjoy, because he has a very unique story from behind the scenes. And so now we're going to talk about the beginnings of Boss Radio, which really transformed radio formatting.
And remember, it was done on AM radio.
AM radio in 1965. So tell me about that, because it's like we had a conversation just before we hit the record button, and at this day that we're recording this video, you are the last living original Boss Radio engineer, and staff.
Yes.
Of any of them. You're the last living one. All of the architect, Ron Jacobs, even Bill Drake, all the Boss jocks, and every engineer you worked with have all passed.
I think a couple jocks are still alive.
Yeah.
But
from the original group, but the last of the engineers for sure.
Yeah, but there are no. There's a couple of engineers that worked in different departments and so forth. But anyway, yes,
okay.
The last one.
The last one, but also you were the first one.
Yes, first and last.
The first and last. Isn't that amazing? And the reason we say the first one is because when Boss Radio broke, you were the guy in the studio.
And there was a leakage of knowledge, because you're buying records, you're talking to different people, what kind of songs do you play, so forth and so on, and they would tell something, and somebody would take it up and tell the other radio station, oh, KHJ
was over here buying this music or this music.
So therefore, the leakage occurred, and they start mentioning Boss, and the people there at the station at KHJ got nervous, so they decided that they would go at 3 o'clock that day in May of 1965. They would launch the period of Boss Radio.
Now, it wasn't really meant to start that soon.
No.
Right? But they were concerned that it was, who was it? KFWB or KRLA or...
Yes, I think both of them were doing
one of the stations in town, they were concerned they were going to try to break a Boss type format.
Right.
And KHJ made sure they had to be first.
And they didn't know if they would make it or not. It was very
you were running the board. You were running your board shift.
There was what had happened about a few weeks before, they had hired all the disc jockeys of the Boss jocks. They had hired them all.
So that's who? Name them. Robert W. Morgan, The Real Don Steele,
Sam Riddle, Johnny Williams overnight.
Yep.
And Humble Harv was in there.
Okay.
And there was a whole bunch of them. I mean, after 20 years, you got to meet a lot of these. But anyway, at the initial start of it, that was almost the first time that overnight that Johnny Williams, the KHJ signed off at midnight. And he was the first one then to start at midnight.
Poor dude.
So anyway.
They're not even on the air because they signed off.
So we started, I was...
Well, so you were saying, okay, so while we were preparing, so you were telling me that the jocks were all hired several weeks before, and they were there rehearsing with different songs, different formats, but they were rehearsing because it was a very tight format, what they were supposed to say and how this was going to go, and so they had to practice.
Right, and we were playing like Frank Sinatra records or whatever it is, and now we were going to switch over to Boss Radio, which was Sonny and Cher.
Yeah, rock and roll.
Roll.
The Beatles.
The whole way. So therefore, this thing happened then, 50 some years ago. My goodness, it's
been a long time
ago.
So tell me the experience. So you were this is when engineers, they were the only ones that could touch the equipment.
Two unions, engineering union and then the talent after union. and so therefore the after people, the disc jockeys, couldn't do anything. They couldn't even turn on the microphone.
They had to sit there.
They had to sit there and they would go like this, turn on the microphone, and then we would turn on the microphone, and then they would sit there quietly until the song ended, which they would hear in their headphones, and then they would talk. And then of course they had a fast
Delivery, right, of what they
delivery,
said.
only lasts for a few seconds, and then they
Back to the
cue
music.
you, and
Yeah.
boom, they hit you again. So we played.
So
all
it was
the
so I
commercials.
love it. It was a team. It was really a team. It was the engineer and the jock were a team. So that's part of what your job was you played the music and you played the commercials and all the jingles and everything.
And then 2 weeks later, I would then take another shift.
Right, take a different shift.
And you
So
never
the
remember?
first day, 3:00
Right.
on this, I think it was like May 3rd, 1965 or something. We have to check our archives.
yeah.
It was sometime in May 1965. 3:00, Ron Jacobs and Bill Drake come into the studio and tell you it's happening right now.
And the music gal Betty, she brought in all the songs. We moved all the carts with rhymes, which had jingles on them, had commercials on them, and everything else. And we were ready to go within just minutes.
So you said a chaotic 5 minutes, but you're the guy. You are the one who pushed the button to play the very first Boss Radio KHJ.
It was not nervous.
Not nervous, of course not. Why would you be? You had been there for a long time. It was another format of the month.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
A new format of the month, like we talked about in the last video. So who was the jock that was that launched Boss Radio alongside of you?
Well, it was the real Don Steele, who was on the air in the afternoon. Later in the evening was Humble Harv. During the daytime, we had Sam Riddle. It started off with Robert W. Morgan, Sam Riddle. We had Roger Christian, Gary Mack, and some of those people are still alive, doing something anyway, because they're the same age as I am. And
Well, we saw some of them not too long ago because Ron Jacobs, passed away a couple of years ago. He was living in Hawaii, and you and I, about this time last year, I think we went to a memorial service for Ron in Los Angeles. It was kind of a gathering at a restaurant, a very nice event. And some of the people that you just mentioned that are still alive were there. And I was kind of starstruck because some of them were people I had heard on the radio when I was growing up. And there was several others. Who was the game show host that was there?
the game show host was the guy that did the
Martindale.
Oh, Wink Martindale.
Wink
Yes, thank you.
Martindale.
Mom over there in the peanut gallery.
Wink Martindale, and also the guy that was on what the edit this.
Yeah. Well, we'll remember that. Yeah, but that was a fun event, and it's always nice when old radio people get together because they really have these historical stories to tell. So that was the beginnings, the origin of Boss Radio, for you, and you were there at KHJ for 21 years from
1980.
Right.
59 to 1980.
So Boss Radio, you did that for 50. Well, they kept Boss Radio until the late 70s, didn't they?
They kept it until the 70s, yeah. And then went country and western.
Or something like that, yeah.
Some other format.
But we'll have more Boss Radio stories because there's a lot of fun things like with the contesting and things like that, stories that we've heard all our lives.
And I think that's where years ago, 50 years ago, that's where the fun of radio happened. Mm-hmm. There's no fun, or they're trying to find fun,
Yeah.
and is struggling, and
Yeah.
they just have to go back to their roots
Yeah.
and rethink. What did they do that was fun?
Well, it's a lot about it's about radio people telling the radio story, and even recently I've been seeing reports where and I felt this for a long time is that radio was really the first social media,
Yes.
because it was people who were on the air, the DJs talking to the audience, but then taking requests, letting the listener have a say in what was being played, or doing the contest and getting on the air and making requests and talking to them, or to the audience. And that was the beginnings of social media. Was really started in radio. And so it's really important that it's to remember the fun that radio is and to tell the story without apologizing.
Yes. And,
Right?
Yeah, and today you see the television shows that's Make a Deal and stuff like that, where they give away cars, and yet we were giving away cars in
Way back in the 60s.
65.
Yeah.
Like 7 of them in a week.
Yeah.
and not just cheapo cars. We're giving away, I'm trying to think, Oldsmobiles, Cadillacs, Porsche, everything we're giving away. That was the fun of radio.
Well, we have more stories. There's more stories to tell about Boss Radio. This was just kind of to whet your appetite for more about Boss Radio in Los Angeles, and we have some more history there. In fact, we've got there's a lot of stories about what went on in radio in those days. We could talk about sales and promotions and music programming and contests. You have some really fun stories about contests. I know.
We will be here until next Tuesday.
Yeah. Well, it's like. Yeah. Well, like I said in the beginning, I'm Kelly Orchard.
I'm Ken.
This is my dad, Ken Orchard, and we're just having a conversation about radio at its best. And initially, this started out just to preserve Dad's memories for the family, but I decided I was going to post them on YouTube to make them available to anyone who loves a good history of radio broadcasting and wants to know really what went on back in the day behind the scenes, right? Right. So next time we're going to talk about, I don't know, maybe some contests and some of the fun contests that they did at KHJ in Los Angeles back in the day.
Can we talk about Tiny Tim then?
Yeah, we can talk about Tiny Tim. We're going to talk about Tiny Tim. Some people may not even know who Tiny Tim is. Google him. Maybe he's not even Googled or Googleable. Anyway, all right, over and out. See you later.